Hey, what's up, friends? Well, I just got home from work and I took a couple tokes and had a drink, and now I'm ready to make a video. As funny as that sounds, it's actually an awkward endeavor these days. I don't even want to make videos anymore, and when I do, I feel weird uploading them. I think I mentioned that in a previous video, but it's, I wouldn't say concerning, but it's a good thing. It's the fact that I've been changing a lot over the past, well, I've changed a lot over the past lifetime, right? I mean, all of us are constantly changing ideas, and we have new discoveries and new realizations. Sometimes we look back and realize we were total idiots, and other times we look back and say, why can't I be like that again? As we move away from times when we were happy, maybe, or times when we had a better grasp on reality. The more you think about life, the more you acknowledge, the more you learn, the more complicated things become, and the more cumbersome life can be. Which, honestly, when I started this video, I had an intention of giving it a title. Now I don't even know for sure if that's going to be it. It was going to be "I Didn't Vote," because I didn't. Um, and I'm going to explain why. And a lot of people don't need an explanation as to why. But oh, hi Scully. Yeah, I'm hanging out with Scully today. She's been chilling with me, and we've been looking for Mulder. If you don't know who Scully and Mulder are, then anyway, bye. Have a good day. Say hi to Mulder. And it's almost like we're living in the world of the X Files. You know, it's always felt this way to me. Like, not in the sense of course, there's, if you haven't watched the show, it's not necessarily just based around aliens, but the idea of conspiracies, and that everything seems to be, put it this way, propaganda has become the currency of the masses. Propaganda sells so well. When people can convince you of something that they believe, they can profit off of it because they become the author of truth. And in my eyes, in my young, my youth, right? I consider myself young at 46 years old because I realized that when I first got into politics or understood anything about it, I was like 26. Now I'm 46. But when I'm 66, I'll have 20 more years. And that's not just 20 years on top of the 20 years, but rather 20 years with the knowledge I have now to ponder and stew. I believe that the most important realizations we can have come after we've processed something for a long time. So, to give you kind of a side tangent here, when a person takes psychedelics, people talk about the discoveries that they make, but when you really ask them, when did you come to these conclusions, they'd say, actually, it wasn't even during the trip. It was late, late in the night, or the next day, or the day after that. It's not that the psychedelics gave you insight, it's that psychedelics removed certain walls in your brain that allowed you to see things differently and process them. And not until we process these things, which can take time, can take minutes, hours, days, years, then we don't really know what we even know until we've stewed it around in our minds. I hope that makes some sort of sense, but philosophy has taught me to think things through. So that brings me to the point of elections and politics. This is right now the midterm elections 2022. I didn't have any interest in voting. I didn't even see if I got I'm sure I got a ballot in the mail, but I decided to sit this one out, which ordinarily would just be fine. You know, I do my thing, I do me, you do you. And but there are other elections that I have voted in. It depends on how I'm feeling. And right now I'm feeling very ignored by politicians, just like I always have. Therefore, I've kind of had it. And I've said this before, so I'll explain where I'm coming from. In the past, I might get pamphlets in the mail. Right now, I'm getting text messages consistently from people. Over the past week, I don't even know how many I've got from random people. Hey, Joshua, I'm so and so for the Washington Democrats. Can we count on your vote? And they'll list all their Democratic candidates. And I would say, well, why should I vote for all Democratic candidates when I should really be looking at their policies as individuals, you know? The responses I get, of course, are generic because these people are texting a whole load of people. And it would be like, oh, well, make sure you vote for these people. And I'll respond with something akin to, well, that's the problem. You don't answer the questions. That's why I'm not voting this election cycle. That the Democrats are no better than Republicans. And the fact that you think I'm a Democrat really shows how little you understand about the disheveled majority, which is the independent majority in this country is independent at around 40 to 40 something percent of people consider themselves, when asked, honestly, independent. And they will tell you that, well, I have to vote Democrat or Republican because, you know, that's the only options. And that's true. You do, if you want to vote and have your vote count. I know a lot of other options exist. I understand that we are now voting for ranked choice voting, even I believe in my state, which means that the next highest becomes the vice president. There are many different ways to do, a political system, and I honestly am just not interested. And I'm forced to be interested because I live in this country. Therefore, there's this obligation people say I have to vote and make my voice heard. And I remember, because I hear this consistently, if you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain. And George Carlin did a fine skit on this. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. He says often people are told that we don't have the right to complain if we didn't vote. And he says, bullshit. He says, you don't have the right to complain if you did vote, because you bought into a system that's fucking politically biased, where you're not making a point by voting for the candidate that is the least evil, right? When I see Democrats standing up for the guy who's in office right now, Joe Biden is one of the weakest leaders I have ever seen. I honestly believe that Joe Biden is the weakest leader that I've ever seen for any country, ever. And he's leading this nation in one of the most crucial times, as they always say. And that's why they told me these votes, your vote matters. When I ask them for what their candidates stand for, they tell me nothing. They say, I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm like, don't be. Because I'll text them back. And that's what I've been doing, is texting them back and saying, why should I vote for this person? And where were you guys over the last few years when businesses were being shut down because of lockdowns over this stupid fucking bullshit pandemic? Silence, crickets. And then there are always people who are on the Republican side to say, yeah, you're right. Come join us. No, Republicans are morons too. Not Republicans as a whole, not each individual, but the fact that the party itself and the way that it handles, criticism and, personal freedoms. It's like, well, I want freedom to do what I want, but not what you want. And so I'm not going to harp on either side. The point is, I don't give a shit about either one of them. And I'm not a politically oriented person. I believe in small local politics that matter. So getting the text messages just kind of set me on a little bit of a tangent. So my apologies. I know a lot of people out there are probably already angry because they say voting matters. And honestly, it really doesn't. It does matter as a whole, yes. But each individual is going to have moments where they just don't want to partake. And this is one of those moments. And I'm well aware of what's coming in 2024. It might even be the culmination of just this kind of comedy that we have in this country, where we are kind of getting to the point where we're very similar to where Rome was in the age of decadence and then the age of collapse, if you will. The age of decadence is when, everyone is pretty well off, but they don't really acknowledge it. There are plenty of poor, plenty of poverty and addiction and problems in this country, but that's not due to a lack of resources that we have. That's due to a lack of morale and values. And I don't mean morals, don't get me wrong. I mean a lot of people just don't have morale. When a troop is in a military zone and they don't have support from, say, their generals or their commanders or the leaders, they lose morale and they don't fight as well. The same way that every city in this damn country, every individual, every community needs to be respected. And they're not by the government at all, on either side. To give you an example of why this is so important to me, I guess, or worth talking about rather, not important, I guess. Everything is important in this in this topic, though. When around 2016, the federal government, a lot of people don't know this, but many of you are well aware, decided to crack down on kratom, right? It was the same thing they tried to do with spice, the same thing they tried to do with, do you remember the scare of salvia? Salvia is potent as hell. It's still on the shelf in the stores. Kids lost interest, right? All of a sudden it wasn't a big deal anymore. It wasn't going to destroy our youth and have them running through the streets naked. Well, kratom was the next big scare, but those of us who had taken it for a long time, and I started in 2009, and on a side note, I'm on a taper right now. I've actually, after 13 years of taking kratom, I've decided to quit. And so I'm doing it as a taper, and I've tapered significantly over the last week, and I'm feeling fine. It's, I don't know how people make a big deal about it. But anyway, that's another story altogether. In 2016, the FDA cracked down on kratom and said that they were going to schedule it an opioid and ban it in this country. And I was a user in 2015, and I started my business selling it. We were pissed. I had a seizure of a shipment of 50 or 100 kilos, right? I'd ordered this and paid for it overseas. It was being delivered to me, and it came across the border, and the customs seized it and sent me a letter and said that they weren't going to give it to me because it was improperly labeled or something. This is when the FDA said they were cracking down on kratom. I was pissed. I never got the crate, and they claimed on the thing, I still have the slip, it said the approximate value $25,000, which it was not worth nearly that much. But the fact that I had that was wow, they're willing to take, this shit happens all the time. This is illegal search and seizure. Not only that, but PayPal stole $3,500 from me and held it for 6 or 7 months. And then they finally released it because I had an herb website, even though I wasn't using it for kratom, or I'd made an effort not to. It was a long story, but I'm sorry to get on a tangent there, but the point was that when this all was happening and they were trying to ban it, I started sending text messages emails to my senators, to the congressmen. We sent out many, many letters to local and federal politicians. Did I hear back from one of them in person? Never. During the whole period when we were signing petitions. But all of a sudden, when they want my vote, they're willing to get people and pay people out of their donations to sit and text message me. Hey, Joshua. It's not even just the ones where they want you to vote. It's the ones where, will you make a donation to our campaign? A few years ago, I donated to Bernie Sanders' campaign. My wife and I did. We love Bernie Sanders. He was a huge inspiration for us, the way that Trump was to a lot of other people. I know that a lot of us, those of us who are honest, I guess, realize that we were kind of hoodwinked on both sides. Bernie means well. I don't think he's a bad guy. And I don't think Trump is a bad guy, okay? I think that they both just live in their own delusions of the way the world works. And a lot of people really want change. We want change so bad. But it's not that we want things to change necessarily to support our views. We just want people to shut the fuck up, find something they love to do, live in this world, and just leave each other the fuck alone. I was also going to title this video Channel 9. I'm sitting here with the CB, and if you're not familiar, CB has a Channel 9 button. Takes you right to Channel 9. They all have them, and Channel 9 is known as the emergency channel, and 19 is the trucker channel. But generally nobody uses it anymore. But as I was looking at it, I started thinking about that, you know, the emergency button. The thing that gives you hope that's sitting there, right? You know, just in case something happens, and you push it and nobody's there. And that's how I feel about the fucking politicians out there pretending like they give a shit about you and me. I have an issue with people who divest their portfolio too much, for example. I know how hard it is for me to get up and go to work. We all have the same amount of time in the day, right? You get up, go to work all day. I'm a carpenter. I've been building tiny houses, and I love what I do, okay? But it takes all my energy to do it right. One job, 8 hours a day. Come home, you know, with drive time, it adds some time. Enjoy the family time, and then sleep for 8 hours a night, right? This is the schedule, 888. And this is why with politicians who say have many different investments and they run businesses on the side, this is why I had an issue with guys like Trump, because he's too distracted. No, I want somebody who's going to put in a full 8 hours a day. At least. If you're a president, I'd hope you'd put in more. But you know what I'm saying. I mean, we know that these guys have been on fucking drug cocktails since JFK. I mean, they all had their own doctors and they were taking certain cocktails, whether it be coke, amphetamines, whatever. We're living in a fucking weird world where politicians and leadership have always had to use drugs to keep on top of their game. Yet at the same time, they've always ridiculed society for taking their own. Saying, live life on life's terms, you know, be sober, be a good American citizen, and you know, don't drink, don't smoke. But they're doing all the same shit. And it's human nature. Because we idolize these people. I don't, but some do. They really put politicians on a pedestal. The same way, like if a guy like Elon Musk ran for president, millions of people would vote for him. Even though the guy basically he stretched himself so thin over so many different ideas that there's no way, and there's absolutely no way that a guy could manage that many different things the way he takes credit for those things. And I know this. We all know this. But yet we still idolize individuals. I hate politicians. I can't help it. I don't hate much, and I don't take the word lightly. In fact, I tattooed it on my knuckles when I was 15 years old with a spider web because I was so angry about life in general. My dad had just passed away, and I didn't know what to do. I was a teenager, angsty, you know. I had bad acne. Things didn't go my way. And you know what? As I got older, things still didn't go my way. But I don't sit around and complain about it. Well, I mean, as far as like being rich, like all the things that Americans idolize. In my opinion, I'm the wealthiest man I could be. I have an amazing family. I don't talk about my family because I don't want to bring them into the discussion, but my wife is just amazing. I can't even begin to define how awesome she is and how patient she is. And we have 3 boys that are 10 years old, 13, and 26. You know, our 10 and 13-year-old, my 10-year-old's at karate right now. My 13-year-old's a gamer, and he's always in there on his computer. And we live the life of trying to manage our family, and just like everyone else does. And as Americans, all we want to do is just be able to live our life and have the people who are supposed to be running this show putting in as much work and effort as we are. You know, really giving a shit about the people. And I'd like to ask if anybody really thinks there's a time when politicians gave a shit about the average person. And I'm not talking local, because I know local politicians, mayors, governors, even, they tend to really care about the state and the local. And I think that's important. I think we do need government on a state level. But I think the federal government just seems feeble and a waste of all of our time right now. They're not managing anything properly. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. And that, my friends, is why I didn't vote. And doesn't mean I won't vote in the elections, but honestly, if the options are the same as they were last time, which it's looking like they might be, let's just say this is going to be an interesting couple years. And I just want to be able to have my own land, get away from it all. But you can never get away from it all. That's my political rant. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. I hope I didn't offend anyone, but if I did, too fucking bad, because we're living in a time when everyone's offended about everything, and it's really dumb. I don't get easily offended at all unless it's something personal from somebody I respect. If it's a stranger, it's like, what's the point? And we really need to stop being children and getting upset about things. Be able to take things with a grain of salt, make a joke, laugh, have fun with people, and be able to have discussions when we have different opinions. You know, on another side note, Joe Rogan had a podcast, for example. I listened to some of them, and I enjoy them, and others I'm not really into. That's the way it should be. But I think Joe Rogan is a great interviewer, and he does a good job. And he had Matt Walsh on, like yesterday, and he's the guy who made this movie or documentary called What is a Woman, where he went out and interviewed people, asking them, you know, what is a woman? People who, it was basically, he's a Christian fundamentalist. I think he's a douchebag. I don't like him, but a lot of the points he makes I can't deny, and that's why I'm willing to listen to people, even if I don't agree with them. Same with Joe. I don't agree with everything he thinks or feels, but listening to two people talk about this, it was so fascinating because of all the hate that they got. Because of all the people who said, you know, you're basically platforming racism and hatred and bigotry without even listening to it. And we're living in a time right now where people are not even listening to each other. And yes, you do have to open your fucking ears. I don't care if you're on some liberal college campus and you think that I shouldn't have to hear this. Sure, walk away, don't listen. But don't you dare try to silence individuals for what they think. And that's part of the reason why I'm not voting for Democrats, because they are basically the new free speech, you know, haters. Just like it happened in the past with Republicans and Democrats, you know, back in the day with, you know, trying to ban free speech in music and movies. It's an ongoing problem. And the number one thing that we have, I know this sounds maybe silly to some people, but the number one important thing that we have in this country that keeps us all together, the central tenet, is free speech. And it's very important that we acknowledge that. It's not a founding fathers thing. It's a basic common sense thing. That the minute you try to silence somebody else's voice, or you go along with the status quo because you're afraid to speak out yourself, you're just as guilty. And that, in my opinion, is the worst thing we can do for ourselves. Let me know what you think. I'm sure people will. And yeah. What else should I say? Be sure to check out the podcast, 15-Minute Free Thinking. I really should have made this a podcast. Fuck. Every time I do one where I'm, you know, make a longer video, I intend to make a podcast, and I just didn't set up the microphone. But talking to the camera just seems to be more authentic. It's just how I feel. Thanks for listening, and yeah, don't buy into the bullshit. Don't buy into the propaganda. Don't let anybody guilt you into thinking you should do or shouldn't do something. You're a human being on this earth, and you need to make your own decisions like we all do. Peace.